Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Standard Protocol. I'm your host, Matt Sutter. Thank you for tuning in today. This is episode number 7. We appreciate your followership and your listenership. We are on SoundCloud, all 7 episodes, and we just recently went live on YouTube as well. So you'll catch this episode and all the previous ones on YouTube as well. If you have friends that have been following us on SoundCloud, or maybe you've been following us on SoundCloud, but they don't have SoundCloud, send them over to YouTube, introduce them to the show that way. Just do a quick search, Standard Protocol with Matt Sutter, and you will get all 7 episodes up and running on YouTube. So thanks for sticking with us. Just want to remind everybody the email inbox, standardprotocolpodcast@gmail.com. Again, standardprotocolpodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate your questions, comments, concerns. That's what fuels the show. Any issue you want to see us tackle, shoot us an email, let us know, and we will try to get it penciled in for discussion on the air. So, with that, I wanted to roll into today's topic, and normally I have 4 or 5 items I want to touch on, but this one is pretty much going to be all about a singular topic this week, and that's mental health. And when I say that, I don't mean the person that's, out on the street corner screaming at buses as they go by, because that's a much bigger issue than I'm qualified to tackle. What I want to talk about with regard to mental health is how's everybody doing out there? How are we all doing in our fields? And do we feel mentally strong and mentally healthy when we go out every day to get the job done? And there's a lot of things that are weighing on everybody nowadays. It's everything from inflation to gas prices to the post-pandemic things that we experienced over the last 2 years, and trying to get back into a sense of normalcy there. So there's just a lot going on out there, and I wanted to touch on mental health because it is a big issue, and it is often I don't want to say it's overlooked, but I think it's definitely under-discussed. And so I just wanted to make today's episode about mental health and what things are you seeing out there? Where do we need to do better? How do we need to do a better job of taking care of our fellow humankind? The biggest thing that I see right now is people are very inconsiderate of others, and you never know when that person on the other side of the counter is having a bad day, their absolute worst day, and then not getting good customer service or not being treated with respect. All of a sudden that may push them into a downward spiral, and you just never know what other people are going through when you cross paths with them. And I'll give you an example of that. Yesterday, I went to my local post office to mail a package, and the guy in front of me was just completely outrageously rude to the person behind the counter who was trying to help them. And I recall just standing there looking at that scenario thinking, what is going on in your life that is so bad that you can possibly come in to a public place where someone is trying to help you and come in with that demeanor and treat them so horribly? And I don't understand how people function that way. Why is what's going on in your life? Why does that give you the right to treat somebody so terribly, just so horrendously bad? I don't understand that, and I'll never be able to wrap my mind around that. But clearly there's an individual that, is having some stressors in his life, and he chose to take it out on the postal employee. And I thought the postal employee handled it very well. And so with regard to customer service, you couldn't ask for a better response than to not give somebody a response like that. So to that man's credit, he didn't take the bait. But I think there's a lot of that going on out there in society. I think that there's just a lot of people that are fed up either with their jobs, their home life, their the amount of debt they have piling up, the fact that you were sold. We were always sold that if you go to college and you get this great degree, you're going to go out and conquer the world someday. And the reality of it is, there's very few people that are actually out there conquering the world. Most of us are just doing what we can to try to get by and to try to improve the lives of those around us, whether it be our families or our kids or our friends. But that's really, I think the biggest traumatic experience in life for a lot of people is getting to a point where they're 35, 40 years old and realizing that whatever they've fallen into career wise and family life wise, this is where you're going to be for the rest of your life. This is it. And I know we're always chasing that next high, and we're always chasing that, like a drug addict would. You always, the first high is the best. And so when you come out and you graduate and you feel like you're on top of the world, and then all of a sudden it just becomes mundane reality that is your life. I think a lot of people have a hard time adjusting to that. And I think it does create some post-traumatic stress. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And one of the things that I always like to give examples of my own life and my own career. I mean, that's really what the show's based about, is me, teaching by way of my experience and my mistakes. But years ago, I had a gig where I was very specialized in what I did. And there was only a couple of people in my state that actually were certified and able to do the things that I was able to do with the tools that I had. And I remember going through that and just feeling, once I became the guy where every time somebody needed a certain task done, I was one of the few that could do it. The phone's ringing all the time. Everybody's counting on you. They're glad to see you when you show up. They know you're going to get the job done. And riding on that high for a few years like I did, it was amazing. And I didn't mind working. I didn't mind training. I didn't mind going and putting in as many hours as I possibly could, because I knew I believed in the mission and I believed in myself, and everything was firing on all cylinders. And then what happened was I was offered a promotion outside of that area, and I took that promotion, and I no longer was the specialized guy, quote unquote. I was just another average guy doing average things with everyone else. And that really sent me into a downward spiral. And I would even go as far as to say there was some post-traumatic stress there. And when you hear me talk about post-traumatic stress, I don't use the term post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't use the D because I don't believe it is a disorder. It's PTS, it's post-traumatic stress. We all have a certain amount of it in us to a certain extent, because we've all experienced things in life, whether it's a divorce, it's the loss of a loved one, it's anything, life altering, or something that, maybe your career goals didn't pan out and now you're doing something different. There's some post-traumatic stress involved with all of that. And it's okay to admit that. It's okay to acknowledge it. It certainly is okay to try to seek help for it. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in my position, when I kind of felt myself going into that downward spiral, it took me about 6 months to really realize what was going on. And I noticed that I was a little bit more moody. I noticed that my drinking had increased a little bit. I mean, I wasn't a full-on raging alcoholic, but I was definitely drinking more than I had been prior to this transition in my life. And my sleeping habits changed. I was staying up late. I was struggling all the way around. And one day it hit me that this is because at one point in time you were the go-to guy, and now all of a sudden you're not, and your mind is having trouble. Your mind and body are having trouble putting themselves at ease with that, and having trouble with that transition of being on a high to now just being back down to a normal level. And I think that a lot of people go through that and don't even know it. And if you're, I'm not saying that ignorance is the way to go through that, because if you don't know it, then you don't acknowledge it, then you don't have a problem, so to speak. But the reality of it is, if that is something you're going through, you can work it out on your own. I did, but I don't recommend that. I would recommend, sitting down with a trained professional, with a counselor, and really peeling back the layers of that and finding out what the root cause of that is. And I guarantee you, if you find yourself at a point where you're, say 40 years old, and you find yourself in that position where Your sleeping habits have changed. You're short tempered, especially with your children. You become short tempered with your children. And I get it. Kids are exhausting. That's just part of raising a family. But if you find yourself in that mood or in that position where you're taking it out on other people around you that don't necessarily deserve it, that can be a sign that you're dealing with some type of post-traumatic stress. And I guarantee you, if you look and think hard enough, you can trace that back to something in your life that's changed, whether it's the death of a loved one, something at work where you put in a ton of work, and then the project was either canceled out or you were told, you didn't do a good job when in fact you thought you did a really good job. There are always these triggering events that you can go back to and say, okay, here's where I started to drift a little bit. And it's, you don't always have to go full blown off the rails, having, your whole life falling apart. That's not what it's all about. It's about little changes within you that are caused by these stressors, big and small. And so the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have a problem. And so, you have to kind of peel back the layers of that and figure out what's going on. And you can do that on your own, like I say, but it's not easy, and I don't recommend it. I recommend going and getting some professional counseling of some sort and reaching out. Now, sometimes I know, depending upon the environment you work in, there can be stigmas associated with reaching out to the employee assistance program or the early intervention program or the chaplain program or peer-to-peer support, whatever it is that your work environment has. Even if it's, chaplain support through your church, there sometimes can be stigmas associated with these things. There shouldn't be, but the reality of it is there is in some cases. Don't be afraid of that. There are ways around that. And quite frankly, if you need more, specialized or personalized advice, send us an email. Let us know what you're going through and we'll help you here. That's part of what we do here, is to try to make sure that you're on the right path for health and success here. So standardprotocolpodcast@gmail.com. But back to my original example of when I was riding a high, one of the things that helped me realize what was going on with me and transitioning from that high back down to, regular, I don't know what you want to call it, regular mode or just normalcy. One of the things that I read about at the time, and I don't know how many of you are going to remember this because we're mostly millennials and Gen Zs on here. But for those of you that are a little bit older, you may remember back in 1987, there was a girl, baby Jessica, fell down a well in Midland, Texas. And these first responders and, there's a police officer, a firefighter, and, a lot of utility crews that all came together. They drilled a parallel shaft next to this well, and then they drilled over and they were able to go underneath her and pull her down further and then get her up out of the well through the shaft that they had done. Interesting story. You can Wikipedia it or Google it, whatever. Anyways, after that incident happened, a lot of those first responders had kind of a 15 minutes of fame. There was a TV movie made about it. There were, real-time actors that came in and played. There were some big name actors that came in and played the parts of some of these people. And this town of Midland, Texas was riding on this high from this incredible rescue of this 2-year-old girl that they had pulled off. And then all of a sudden, the media attention went away because this is back when there wasn't really much of a 24-hour news cycle. I mean, obviously, when the story was unfolding, everybody was huddled around TVs watching CNN, watching it unfold. But after the fact, there really wasn't a lot of follow-up coverage on it. And all of a sudden, these folks that had been thrust into the spotlight and were on this main stage for doing something very noble, they all of a sudden the glitter wore off and they just fell back down to a sense of normalcy in their lives. And a lot of them did not adjust to that well. In fact, one first responder committed suicide. There was another first responder that I believe developed a substance abuse problem and a sex addiction. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he ended up in prison for sexually assaulting someone. But a lot of lives were changed because of all this positive attention that they got at that time and how quickly it all went away. And it's very similar to the situation that I was in. And this is how I kind of made the connection in my life, that at one point in time, the phone was ringing nonstop and you were the guy that everybody needed to solve a problem. And when you showed up, everybody was happy to see you. They knew you were going to get the job done. They knew you were the person with the tool to help them out. And then all of a sudden you weren't. And that is very difficult for some people to handle, including myself. It was difficult back then. I think now that I'm a little older, I would have handled it differently. But at that time in my life, it sent me into kind of a massive funk, I guess I'll describe it as. So just acknowledging that and being self-aware enough to know when you've changed and when you're changing both mentally and physically, and how these things are affecting you. Being self-aware is a good first step to ensuring your own mental health. So again, if these are the types of things that you're going through, there's a good chance that most of the people you encounter out there are going through similar things as well, where they're dealing with all the stressors of life. So don't scream at them at the post office counter. Don't go off on them in traffic because of, they cut you off or whatever. Be cool. Give them some space. If they need to talk, let them vent. Always be a good listener. Always be the type of person that somebody can sound off of. And that's what the show here is about is I sit here and I talk every week, but really I want to listen. I want to listen to your problems and I want to come to solutions. And that's what the substance of my talk is all about, is how do we help you through whatever situation it is that you're in? And mental health being very under-discussed, I'll say, that's one of the things that we need to hone in on a little bit better. So any advice that this show can give you as far as mental health, please let us know. We are not trained professionals in this. We're not certified professionals. We've had a lot of experience over the years dealing with mental health, people in mental health crises and things of that nature. But I'm not a certified counselor. I'm not a doctor of any kind, but I do know where the resources are. And if you need to share something, if you need to, discuss things and find out if professional help is what you need, feel free to send us an email and we'll have an exchange with you back and forth over the email, and we'll try to get you to the appropriate resources for help. So, with that, I wanted to talk about one last thing here. I read an article in a local publication, and this is directly tied back to our previous mental health discussion. I told you the topic today would all be very similar, singular topic for the show for episode 7 here. I read an article that says that suicide rates among farmers is become extremely high. And they are now going as far as to teach the ag industry, whether, bankers and, folks in the agriculture field, to recognize those signs of when somebody's, depressed or experiencing anxiety, things, post-traumatic stress, things of that nature, where they may be leaning towards suicidal thoughts. They're now teaching a lot of people around the ag industry to pick up on those and recognize those thoughts and know where the resources are and get people help. That is something we should be doing in every profession. Certainly the profession that I come from, law enforcement, we are always having conversations with each other about these things. The medical profession, I think that's another one. Post-pandemic, there are a lot of doctors and nurses that are struggling with things. So, it shouldn't take the stats rising like that for somebody to step in and make a change, but sometimes it does, because we don't know what we don't know, and until we see the numbers and the data, sometimes we're just not on top of things. But every profession out there, whether you are in banking, agriculture, government, any field that you're in out there, small businesses, a lot of small business owners and employees are struggling now. please be cognizant of those signs. Be aware of when people are struggling and how to get them help around us, because that is the only way that we're going to overcome the mental health issues in this country, is if we start to recognize them and we start to direct people to the proper resources to get help. So please keep that in mind. Take care of yourself, take care of each other. Let someone help you through your problems, and don't be afraid to volunteer to help them through theirs. That's what being a human is all about. So with that, we're going to close out episode 7 here. Appreciate your listenership. Check us out, SoundCloud, YouTube. We're up and running on both, and be safe out there. Take care.